Hey guys, welcome back. And today I'm going to be going over this material that I created. Specifically, this material is going to be used for anime effects or cartoon effects, specifically energy, as you see here, kind of like a force field. It can also be used for like laser blasts or just overall energy effects. It's going to be in two parts, and this first part is going to be going over this material. And the second part will be going over making the material mesh that you would apply this material to and actually make like a neat little energy effect. This is just a couple examples. You could do so much with these materials. Obviously, you can put it on top of like different objects and be able to do anything you need to have a force field or energy. So these materials are completely procedural. We are using, as you see here in the bottom, this giant node tree that is used to create these materials. And when I say materials, I actually just mean material. This is just one material where I just changed the settings and I was able to create these different effects. And there's probably many more that you can create and use. To make it easy, instead of me giving this material and just leaving you in the wilderness here, going through this node tree, trying to figure out what items to change, I actually made custom properties in the energy, in the material section here, in the material tab, and added all the different settings I think that you can mess with to be able to change different effects and be able to make them. So it kind of like takes the thinking out of it. All this is being run by drivers, so you see that there's like purple little highlights here that are specifically used for these custom properties, and you can change the settings. So let's just go through this whole list here, because it does seem a little daunting. There is a lot here, but I promise it's a lot easier than going through this web of nodes here in the shader. So first things first, let's pause this for a second. Let's duplicate one of these orbs. I'm gonna bring it here to the left. All right, here we go. So first thing we want to do is I'm gonna duplicate this material because this is the same one as the one that I duplicated it from. So we want to make it unique. You see it says 2 there, so we'll hit this little button here that says new material. It'll make it 10, or whatever number that you're on. So now I can change all these settings and not affect any of the other materials that I created. So let's start from the top of the list, and I'll also follow in the node tree here for you to understand what's going on. I'm not going to go super in depth, but just for you to see how this works. So the first setting we have here is going to be opacity, and opacity just makes it invisible, right? And you can see that it's affecting the mixer shader here. Boom, opacity. Second thing, second one on the list is show backface. It's either going to be 0 and 1, 0 being off, 1 being on, and you could see that it just changes a little bit. And what this setting is, it's actually right here in the settings of the material. See how it's purple? We're turning this on and off, right? So you can see we turn it on and we put show backface. And what that means is basically with showing the back face, you're able to see through this object and see the back half of the orb. If you turn this off, we're right now only looking at the front of the material, as you see. So sometimes you want it on, sometimes you want it off. It really depends on what you're doing. That's why it looks like it's duplicated here, the texture. That's just because we're seeing the back end of it here. Okay. So that's that setting. So now we're going to go into color settings. And when you make your own materials and play with these settings, I do suggest going just down the list here and doing it this way. So we'll pick the color settings. So here in the color settings, so energy color 1. So that's going to be what's inside of the orb here, or the first material. So we can change that to any color. You can see we can make it like a blue color. And then the second energy is the rim, or the edge of the object. Here we go. And we can change it to red. See, something extreme there. The energy position, and what this is changing here is this color up here. You see, you can change the color. And that's what we're changing inside of here, right? Red, here, right? So the next options are energy, color position, and what this determines is how far this blue goes into the edge and how far the edge goes into the center, right? So this is the color ramp. You'll see that it's going to start moving. We're moving the blue closer, and we're just getting that rim right there. It's right to the edge, kind of getting rid of it. You can get rid of it entirely, or you can bring the red further in and just make it so the center's like really red there. And that's what these settings do. You can play around with these. Sometimes you mess with these because of the colors. They're not blending so well, so you'll mess with these. This energy color transition, this is just the easing that is in the color. So right now it's on ease. So if we change it to 0, it'll be linear. I guess the best example to show this would be constant. So let's go to constant. So that's going to be the last one, B spline cardinal constant. And then you'll see that if we move this, we're moving the transition. So this is just the transition setting between both colors. You know, we got linear, B spline is pretty good. It's pretty smooth. Ease, linear. Usually I like B spline because it's like the smoothest. And it gives you like this nice like pink rim on it. So that's what transition does. So let's give some of this red here. The next one is energy hue shift. So basically, if you don't want to change the colors individually, you can set up the colors, you like it a lot, and then you will just change the hue very slightly, right? So we'll hold shift and you can change it into different colors, and boom, another way to control these colors. It's very fun. If you hover over some of these settings, I put some tooltips. I didn't put it on this one, but if you put 0.5 here, it'll be right at the base, and it will be the blue and the red. And then energy brightness, this is the overall brightness. This is the emissions, right? And that's at 2, you see, and then we'll bring it up. It makes it super bright. So you're going to be messing with the emissions and the energy brightness a lot, because these different settings affect how bright these effects are. So one thing you have to keep in mind is that this is going to be working in Eevee, and you have to have bloom on for you to see the bloom. Without it, you just see the colors, which, you know, works as well, but the bloom kind of adds that extra effect. And make sure that under your color management that your view transform is under standard instead of filmic. Filmic kind of gives it this washed out look, so make sure you do standard, especially if you're doing like cartoon-esque type of projects. So there's hue, we got our brightness. All right, let's keep on going. The next is the edge setting. So this is all the settings that has to do with this edge rim here, which is the red right now. We have the intensity. We can don't try not to worry about these numbers. You just play around with these settings. So yeah, so if you put it at 0, it's at the brightest. If you put it at 1, it's at its weakest. So obviously if you want it a lot brighter, you can see that even some pink is getting in there, so that's nice. So we'll put a little bit in there. We'll put like 0.5. The edge position is how far the edge goes into the center. So let's see if I can show you that. See how it just starts taking over the center? So that gives you control over the creeping up of the edge and making the middle much brighter. So we'll bring that out there. And the edge transition, and let's see if we can get it here. The edge transition is the same thing I talked about before. If you change it, here it is. So it just changes from easing, you know, to B-spline, cardinal, constant, and you can see that it's just a transition between the edge there. So we'll put it back to B-spline, or maybe actually we'll do it to linear. Okay, the next is the center settings. It's only one setting, so it just makes the middle brighter, the texture and everything in the middle. It's the intensity of it, so it makes it darker or brighter. So we'll make it less dark, or see, we're bringing it up, and then we can make it much brighter. So this is to control the intensity of the center there. So then we're going to get into the textures here, and this is where all the different effects start to play, right? There are two textures that are in play here, right? And this is the whole texture setting, this web of mess here. the first texture we're going to have is the texture main, and that's the main texture that's here. And then the second texture is what's masking that texture. It gives it some more detail. So let's go over the texture main. So that's going to be these two textures. So this is the first texture here, and this is the second texture, right? So here's the first one. So the first one, you get to the first setting is going to say texture type 1. So you can either go from 1, which is the magic texture, or 0, I should say, is the magic texture, and then you can go to 1, which is just the Musgrave texture, and then obviously 0.5, it's going to be a mixture of both in there. You see? And I think if you, yeah, I put it on this one. If you put your mouse over it and hover, it'll have a tooltip. You can see that it says 0, magic texture, 5. So first we choose our, first textures. Let's just go full Musgrave on this one. So we get the Musgrave texture, and we'll put it to 1 here. So we have like this kind of like grainy effect here, right? Then the second setting we have it's called type setting. I was trying to figure out some descriptive names, but once you start getting into this, it gets very, very difficult to name these things. So we have type setting, which changes the type of Musgrave texture this is. So this is that first one, heteroterrain. If we change it, you can see it goes from rigid fractal, hybrid fractal, FBM, and you can get some different effects here. See, we went to multifractal, and now it's completely gone, right? So there's two ways to fix this to be able to see it. So at the bottom of this main texture section is the intensity. We can just lower this, and now we have a nice looking detailed texture. So when you change textures, just make sure if it gets too bright, change the texture intensity for you to be able to see it. So let's see how this plays out. Okay, that looks pretty cool. So the second setting is the scale, right? Texture 1. Second setting is the scale, and this just shows you how big the texture is. So let's do something like really tiny, 0.01 there. So now this looks kind of interesting there. It's breaking apart. So then the next is the detail, and the detail will change here. You see it's changing it right there. So detail. Let's lower the detail to maybe like 1, so it's not grainy. And then we could change the scale, and we could see what that looks like. So it is there. And then grain is put to 40. And grain, I named it grain because that's kind of what it does. But what it's actually is the lucinergy. I don't know what that means, so I just named it grain. And that's the setting here. So let's see. There we go. You see how it gets all grainy and messed up. So there's our setting here. We're changing it. There we go. And some of these settings, as we change through like multifractal, like let's change our setting type here. Let's go to rigid multifractal. You see, there's nothing here, right? And you can see that the rigid multifractal has gain, and that's what this is. Gain and grain, kind of like similar. I try to capitalize it to make it different, but that's the change. That's the setting that this changes. And some of these different settings don't have gain, so this won't do anything when you're on those settings. So let's see if we can spot this, if we can fix this. You can see that we still can't see anything. We can just change some settings here. Oh, we're seeing something's very subtle here. We can change the scale. There it is. And boom, we have just a whole different look here. And that was just changing the type setting. So let's switch back to something more detailed here. Something we like. This looks fun. And with all these settings, really, you're just going to be playing around with all these dials and sliders. It's actually quite half the fun to do all this. All right, there we go. We got some detail going on. We can add this grain here. We can make this bigger. There we go. Okay, so then the next setting is mapping. And what mapping is basically the setting between these two texture coordinates, which is going to be generated and reflection. So there's only two settings for that. It's going to be 0 and 1. So it's on 1 right now. And you can see it changed it to 1. So this gives you different effects. Reflection, which is number 2, kind of maps it onto objects like if it's a reflection. And 0 puts it on like if it's part of the orb itself. So definitely play around with those, mix and match them, have some fun. All right, so let's bring this in. See, I'm just changing the settings and it's completely different. All this is so procedural, so fast. Okay, so next, after all those settings, we have our second texture, and our second texture is down here. And our second texture is what masks the main texture. So let's just play around with some of these settings, and they're basically doing the same thing at the top here. So just play around with these. So let's just play around with them real quick here. So let's, go to type setting 1. This texture type, like I said before, you're going in between you're going between two textures, and the texture is magic and Voronoi. And you'll see that here that this mix changes, right? So it goes from 0 to 1. See, so you have this magic texture, and then you have Voronoi. Magic texture, Voronoi. So let's go to magic texture because it kind of gives it like a nice scaly look. And let's put the scale up. And I think the main texture is a little bright, so let's lower the intensity of that. There we go. All right, let's bring the Voronoi up. Let's bring the intensity of the Voronoi. Nope, let's actually lower it. Change the mapping. There we go. Let's change these setting types, and you'll see that we're changing the depth here when we change the first setting type. Depth 3, depth 4, scale. There we go. So yeah, so you just mess with all these settings here, and you can create an interesting effect. And the last section is animation. And what animation is, it's this web here that is just quite large. But these three settings are X, Y, Z, and it's the animation for these different textures, right? So this is the animation speed for the main texture. So let's put everything at 0. And you see that nothing moves, right? We just have this static effect here. But if we move it, and let me activate the XY so you can see. There we go. So the green is the Y and the red is the X. So this is X, Y, Z. If we move it on the Y axis, we'll put it, let's say X, Y. So this one right here, Y, put it 50. You see that the first texture is moving, right? And it's moving kind of backwards. But you can also move it left and right. So let's say we put 0 and we put this at 50. So now it's going left. If you wanted to make it go right, you put a negative in front, and now it's going left. And you can see that we're controlling the animation and what direction it goes. So you could put numbers for all these, 50, 50, 50, and then it's moving all over the place. Definitely play around with that. I usually like just to choose one, so I'll choose, let's say, the Y. And just so you can see it, let's do the X, and we'll do it 50, so it's going to the right. So you can see that it's moving to the right. And you can see that our mask, our texture mask animation is still, because these are all 0. And while they're still, we can actually see it while we change it here. Let's change it. See? There it is. We can change it to the first type, second type, change the details. Okay, and then we can add in some animation here. So let's do the same thing. Put it on the Y. And now we're animating the mask. If we wanted to move slower, we need just higher numbers, because what we're doing is we're dividing the frame number. So here's at 100. If we put it at 500, it's super slow. You can barely tell. If you put it at 0, it stops. But if you put it at 1, it goes at super speeds. So you probably don't want that. You know, I would go up in increments of 10, 30, 40. Usually 50 to 100 is pretty good. And those are all the settings for this whole node setup. And with enough tweaking and playing around, you can do so many different effects. So look how we went from this texture, this is what we started with, and we got this texture. And it was just a lot of fun to do. And I'm going to provide this project file in the link below, or in the description below. There'll be a link for my Gumroad. Just download it there for free. And you can see that you can click on the materials and you can see the settings that I use for each and every one. But I would really recommend for you just to play with all these settings and have some fun and change them and do whatever you want. So this pretty much concludes part 1 of these materials. And the next part will be going over how to apply these materials to different animated objects and actually like put them to work and actually make like these cool effects of like materials and like ethereal stuff, and then figure out, you know, how we can use them on objects and give it like energy effects. So I hope that was not too long for you, but hey, it's a free material, guys. Download it in the description. Let me know how you like it. Let me know how it can improve. Let me know if you have any questions. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye.